Welcome back to the HLG podcast, episode number 3. I'm your host, Grow Mouse, aka Brian G. I've got with me the CEO of a horticulture lighting group, Steve Johnson. As always, welcome, Steve.
What's up?
And I've got Blair and Rhys from BC Northern Lights. These are the grow boxes that we have all coveted. Well, if you're as old as we are, back when they used to cut down trees and put ink on them in the back of High Times, or even sometimes in the front. Beautiful 2-page color ads of these lights. So while I was going down to Home Depot and Steve was going down to Home Depot buying like gun cabinets and stuff and angle grind cutting holes in them, they made the beautiful clean white powder coated purpose built grow boxes that we all coveted and wanted. And some could afford, some couldn't. I was a college student when they came out, but we all had a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for the product. We all wish we could have run one. So welcome, guys.
Well, thanks. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good. Well, today we're going to be talking about a myriad of different topics, from the commercialism of horticulture products. LED Grow Light Depot did an amazing video from MJ BizCon. Shout out to him, talking about how they're just not making stuff for home growers anymore. Everything is targeting commercial. I guess everybody's kind of chasing the money. We're going to talk about a brief history of how these guys met, because some of the first lights that Steve built from Johnson Grow Lights way back in the day, he supplied you guys for testing, and you guys were using like HPS in there originally, right? In a metal cabinet. How did that work out initially, and how many years were you running legacy? We like to call it it's our polite way of saying legacy technology. How long were you guys running legacy tech?
Well, obviously, since the beginning, I mean, all we had option to was, magnetic ballasts.
Sure.
So that's what we used.
We played with a little fluorescence in its infancy and realized there was no way you were going to, ever be able to sell anything with fluorescent lights or get any respectable yield. Yeah. So ultimately, initially it was how do you keep the box cool enough using metal halide, high pressure sodium lights.
Sure.
And so really trying to get the box to a point where we could keep it cool enough was our biggest sort of hurdle we had to go with. And at first we had 600 watt at one point.
Okay.
And it was too much. It was just too intense. You're getting a lot of burning and whatnot. But settled in on the 400 watt high pressure sodium, at least for the flowering side.
That's about right.
And,
so you guys are brothers and business partners.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Rhys was the one who started BC Northern Lights.
Okay. And what year was that?
That was 02.
02, okay.
I essentially had quit my job. I was building semis for Western Star Trucks. So I was just an assembler, and I was 7 years in, and basically I'm just another number. I'm not going to grow within this company. I decided to go back to school for actually kinesiology, and during that time, my brother had gone to university, and he had done a project, I guess it was a study on the morality of
ethics, of course.
Ethics, that's what it is. And introduced me to a company, I think it was called PowerGrow.
PowerGrow
Systems. And they were the first
.com,
with just fluorescent lights in a box.
Okay.
And during university, I was thinking of ways to supplement my income, if you will.
Yeah.
And I bought one of these
We all were.
boxes.
Absolutely.
And then just saw this and was like, this could be taken so much further.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, I had a prototype in 20 grand, called up a carpet salesman buddy of mine who said, hey, man, if you got 20 grand, I have a warehouse already lined up. Let's start manufacturing these.
Okay.
And, of course, you have to wear all the hats at that point, right? Sales guy, manufacturing, boots on the ground, guerrilla marketing, throw a couple boxes in the back of your truck and drive wherever to show off your wares.
Sure.
And just that, the growth, how quickly it took off. And, I think within 3 years, we had almost done close to 3 mil,
3 years, back in 2002. So let's think about this. Did you have a cell phone in 02?
It was, I did. Oh, so I think I had my first cell phone when I was 19. So I'd be 99. But I had my first smartphone in 03.
Okay.
So,
that iPhone 1 or something?
No. iPhone was 07. So I had it was called the HTC Wizard.
Okay.
So it was Windows Mobile. You had to use a pen.
A stylus.
You had to use a pen.
A stylus.
Yeah. So I was actually taking a sling box, watching my home satellite, which I'd hacked the card out.
Hey.
I'd hack the card out. You could watch my home satellite over the internet in 2003 when it was 3G. And I know you youngsters are like, what is 3G? But it actually existed.
Two less
and it
than
was
5G.
Really, yeah, it was really bad. It was
What
really bad.
is 3G?
Yeah, I think in '02, I got my cell phone in '01, and I had the kind where it was like the next evolution beyond remember the Nokia with the little nub antenna and you played Snake?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would have been one, it had a little cover that it was a flip phone, but it only covered the keys.
Right.
So,
Yes,
you
that's
had
right,
that
that's right.
tactile.
And then you got the big battery, and it
Yeah.
was double the size. It was like you're holding a brick in your hand.
If you
and-
dropped it hard enough, the battery would kind of fall off. So '02. So you guys didn't really have access. I mean, there wasn't much internet. There's email.
Yeah.
People had
Yeah,
websites.
yeah. BlackBerry was just
Okay.
coming in, right? You know, the QWERTY keyboard was new. Like
Yeah.
that was the first phones with it.
Yeah.
And,
Wow.
yeah.
So you had 20 grand. You found a manufacturing partner, more or less.
Yeah.
And
He was more of a sales guy.
Sales guy.
Yeah,
Okay.
that we
so
needed.
you had to do the sheet metal CAD, I guess, and get some kind of hydraulic press. So, like, were you taking flat sheets of material and bending up
We
the
didn't
box?
have the turret yet or the brakes or
Okay.
anything, so we just hired a company to basically AutoCAD it up and
Okay.
do that for us, and it would come in panels, and then we would assemble them.
Okay.
On site.
So you
then
get your
send 'em up for
shell,
powder coating.
and that is the easy part, right?
Yes.
But not necessarily, getting a nice sealed cabinet where the doors close and the doors don't rack.
A lot
and
of
it
weather
seals.
stripping,
So then you
buying
got a
different-
weather strip, and then what's next? Electrical, fan ducts. Was it all kind of a pre-designed, engineered product, or did you go through a couple iterations?
Yeah, I went through many iterations.
Many iterations.
Especially in the first couple of years. We put in, what is it, PVC plumbing, like in the back. No, ABS, the black
Okay.
ABS plumbing
Yep.
in the back to carry air from one chamber to the other, right? Basically an inch and a half. And as it evolved, we were able to kind of all do it within the shell as opposed to being this 3-inch sort of ugly looking thing hanging off the back of
Yeah.
the box. And our first, carbon filters were so big you couldn't push the machines up against the wall.
Okay.
And so it evolved completely.
Okay, so when did you reach like minimum viable product to grow a plant and start selling these? Was that in '02 or was
Oh yeah, we pretty much out of the gate.
out of the gate,
selling
ready to
them.
go?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
sweet. And did you get to talk much to like was it when did it become apparent that it was probably 99% of people? Or wait, let me not put words in your mouth. What percentage of people do you think were buying them to grow cannabis versus tomatoes or
Oh, yeah,
whatever?
yeah. Tomatoes, 90%. Yeah, for sure. You'd have the odd older individual that was legitimately putting tomato plants in or whatnot. But
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was,
Okay, so '02, where were LEDs in '02? They
they
were
weren't there. Yeah.
no, they weren't anywhere.
weren't.
They were still light bright.
Digital ballasts
level.
were just in their infancy. I think some of the what do you call it? Like street lights.
Yep.
We're just starting to incorporate some kind of digital ballast technology.
in an
that-
HBS.
what year was it that the quantum ballast came out? That was like, that was after '02. That was probably '05. I remember, who was it? Advanced Nutrients had their own at one time. It was called what was it called? Was it the Badass? There was one that was called the Badass ballast.
I don't know if
and
that was Advanced. Was that Advanced?
Yeah, Advanced actually had their own ballast at one point. And then Hortilux came out with the Platinum series, and that was like Square Wave. And I prayed because it's a $600 ballast.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh.
I don't remember all the names. I remember there was a purple one, and when I would go into my hydro store, I would see a whole shelf of return to vendor on the purple one. I think that was
Yeah.
the Phantom. The green
Phantom,
one,
yes.
there was the green ones, which might have been a Hydro Farm product or whatever, the Galaxy Ballast. That had to have been closer to like the 2010s, maybe.
Yeah, and Quantum was gold or something like that.
Okay.
And
We had Quantum, we had Lumitech.
And then I liked
Lumitech, I
so I
remember.
had Solace Tech,
Yeah.
the black ones, and they were fanless, right? And that Solace Tech worked really well for a ballast. It lasted for about a year, and it fried. And then I got and I bought it from Nate at Grower's House, and then he exchanged it for me. Yeah.
We ended up getting our own, well, at least made from the same factory as Lumitech,
Just branded.
but branded as BCNL. So
Oh,
it was
that's cool.
green in color, BCNL, and we got great pricing on it, and that's what we use in our boxes, majority.
Okay. And what kind of system, like hydroponic system? Forgive me for not being as familiar with the product. I never owned one.
Deep water culture.
Deep water
with
culture.
a drip feed system.
Okay.
We did hydrogen.
The hydrogen to start, but then you have to run your pump all the time,
Yep.
and
Right
which
into the
heats up
rock
the
wall.
water, right? So you got to be, because constant drip. So then we came up with a concept of doing the deep water culture with the aeration, and then drip feed for 5 minutes twice a day. And then we realized we don't need it twice a day, maybe once a day.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you aerate enough, then it gets wet from the
And
bottom.
then
You're
it's
good.
Yeah.
And then if you aerated it enough, you didn't even need to do any type of top drip feeding.
Okay.
But it was good though for initial
Yeah, to get the roots
propagation.
down in there. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So I would imagine, obviously I don't know the full history of the product line, but did you end up adding, add-ons like chillers or different environmental controls or things like that? Like how big could you get the shopping cart, or did you kind of stick with what works? You had a working business model. You said they were flying
had
off the
some
shelf.
neat terminology, like they tell them the terminology, because I remember it was like it came with
Like the sales spiel kind of?
Yeah,
like they're all CO2 injected, deep water culture, carbon filtrated for no smell, all set up. We had something called the bloom box, which had 2 separate chambers. So the left chamber had a spot for a mother plant, which we kept in cocoa core. And so that one you hand watered, but then you had a veg system behind it to do all your vegging. In the right chamber, you had the flowering system, and you just had this continuous harvest every 2 months. And
That's cool.
Yeah, it was
That
perpetual
combined with
system.
our producer, he could produce enough clones to supply the.
Now all the
next two.
memories are coming
Yeah.
back.
No,
I
I'm talking
remember
about what
seeing
was
like,
it? So
oh,
didn't
yeah.
you have something with the mac and cheese or
Well,
something?
so then
you know what I'm talking about.
So then
now.
what we
Package
did, we did
deals.
packages, right? So then
yeah.
you could utilize the system to the max efficiencies, right? So we would have, because veg, you can do it quicker than the flowering. Well, if this left side unit can be producing 12 plants or whatever many plants every 3 weeks, you take those, then put them into another producer.
Okay.
So we had packages so we had the big extra, we had the big Mac, the full meal deal, then the big Kahuna, and then we went to a quarter pounder, half pounder, and then the Pulp Fiction.
Yeah,
And the
so
Pulp Fiction,
that was the ones I was
The Pulp
like-
Fiction was 35 units in total, 34 producers, so it had 2 400s in each producer, up to 18 plants. You didn't have to do 18. And then it had 2 producers for vegging, which a 36 lid in each producer.
Okay.
And then we had something called the nursery.
Mm-hmm.
And the nursery would do all of your cloning for you. And it had 4 different levels. You could do like 800 clones. Yeah. Oh, and there was a mothership.
Mothership. Yeah.
the good old
So that was the
mothership.
one. So I built. So
What about the roommate?
Yeah, the roommate. Yeah. The roommate. Yeah.
So let me ask you guys like a hard hitting question. Back then, I remember in 2002, a grow tent was not in the vernacular. Like they might have existed, but like eBay didn't even really get up and rolling. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
don't get me
You
wrong.
had to send money
I was
orders
on
back in
eBay when I
02
was.
when you were buying from eBay.
What's that?
You had to send money orders. There was
That's
no
right.
PayPal yet or anything.
I was
That's
on
what the
eBay
post
in like
office needed.
'97.
Okay.
And that was like, I'd do like a couple car parts or some collectible baseball cards, but it was a whole rigmarole. I mean,
We got stuff to talk about.
PayPal wasn't even integrated, right? So grow tents, I guess I probably should have looked up when Gorilla grow tents hit the scene, but the whole Chinese incursion of all this stuff didn't even hit our country yet, right? So grow tents for more or less weren't really a thing.
Not initially.
Not
And
initially.
when they came out, we didn't feel real threatened by
Maybe
them. It was a
06,
cheaper
07,
alternative.
08, 09, that's when, so we had set up distribution channels like through California.
From Canada to California.
Yeah, so we had stores that would have our products on display
Okay.
and then resell them. But around 08 is when that relationship kind of died, because what would happen is the customer would come in with $3,500 ready to spend to buy a grow box, but he would only be making 20% margin.
I see.
Because that's all we could afford to offer. And the store owner of the grow shop would go, okay, well, I could sell you a tent for $2,000. And he would pocket $1,000 because the margins were so huge back then,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So they would sell the clients out of our boxes.
I see.
So we just dropped that whole model of trying to sell through and just was B2C.
Okay.
Just business is consumer. And that's all we did, just sold it through. And we supported everything, right? We always
That
did.
was huge, the girl
Yeah.
support. Just having phone call, as soon as they got their box, they'd be like, okay, take us through this.
Yeah, I think people really like the idea of buying into a system.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because every 10 is different, and they are and they aren't. I mean, if you're a good enough grower, or you get any 10, you can make it work out. But when you're buying one of your boxes, it's a system. It's the same light. You should know. What are the nutrient strengths and all that stuff. Things that aren't really things that are variables with different strains, but like the customer's expectation is that if I spend $3,500 on this thing, I'm getting a recipe and a blueprint.
That's right.
Did you
Like
find
Jack
that
LaLanne said it,
challenging?
forget it
Or?
kind of thing? A little bit. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the support, the phone calls we get were just real basic stuff that they had no clue. And it would
But
get a
you're
little tired.
responsible because I bought my system from you. I only supplied the seeds, right? So that, to me, it seems like it would be like probably a lot of like drinking whiskey on the weekends, like,
Yeah, somewhat, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and after 10 years, it got a little tiring, for sure.
Right
You'd be
on.
on vacation at Disneyland and telling a guy why his clones are wilting, right?
Right.
You're like, dude, I'm with my kids right now.
Right, you're
Get
training
on Space
him.
Mountain.
Right on. Well, let's fast forward a minute. So obviously the technology didn't exist. I think 2014 was kind of when, in terms of LED technology, was when the technology was available to purchase. But then it would have been maybe it would have been the cost of a cabinet just for the light, probably 2012, 2014. And then I would say about 2016 is when things became, 2015, 2016 is when things became affordable for the consumer in LED. Would you think, is that a fair statement?
Probably. Well, I wouldn't even say affordable then. Even I will say it was within reach. So the LEDs were so expensive and so underperforming, even in like 14, 15, that 16 they became viable technology wise, is what I would look at it like.
I like
because
that. Yeah.
because up until that point, as long as you bought into that plants don't use green light, which we all know now, and I knew then, and who wouldn't have known if you actually thought about it for 5 minutes, you would have knew even back then that the LEDs weren't the thing, because, they were pitching, well, all this light in here and this wattage is wasted. It's just blue and red. It's all, that was the pitch, the original LED pitch. This 150 watt, UFO can replace 1,000 HPS, which we know is impossible to do now, because there's just so many photons when you convert electrons to photons, right? So it just wasn't enough there. And, I think it was when the Cobbs came out and they really started coming on the scene that it was accessible for the DIY guy or a smaller guy to be able to put white light LEDs and assemble them himself. So up until that point, SMT, there were probably a few LEDs out there that were okay. But I mean, I've had the pleasure to meet the originators of Lumitex, right, which was the precursor to Fluence, or BML and all that, right? And they were actually making their own LEDs at one point to be able to have LEDs to use. And even then, it's like if you start thinking about someone making their own LED and then you start looking at the technology that goes into it, they couldn't have been real good. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. They were probably okay, and kudos to them for getting out there and doing it. Somebody had to do it, but they weren't anywhere where they are today, or they would have never gotten there, because it's billions of dollars to get where we're at, not even tens of millions or hundreds of millions. Yeah. But so the Cobb LEDs, you were fooling with them. A lot of people were fooling the DIY forums, and I said, okay, this is viable. But nobody had the time. There was a couple people that were selling lights, but they still looked somewhat DIY-ish. So I think there was a couple guys that were just getting into it, but I think that I kind of pushed into this a finished looking light and high power enough. Most people were doing lights that were 200 watts, 100 watts, 50.
It was an accessory, watts. Not a.
Yeah, it wasn't the main light
staple,
source.
Yeah.
It wasn't your main light source yet. So that's where about 15, 16 was where I really, took off with the technology for me.
Is that about the time that you made first contact?
About 16, I think, is when I called.
And what prompted you to reach out to them?
Well, like you said, I would open up high times and I would pray to. And one of the things I would always think after I grew with 1,000 HPS and I grew with 600 HPS, I thought, because I put a 600 in a 2-foot by 4-foot cabinet, and it was amazingly hot, right? So I got to thinking about that, and I started looking at your box. I was like, wow, I wonder how they deal with that heat, because this is an issue. And I had a cool tube even, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, how are they dealing with this heat? And so I thought about it, and then when I created the Maximizer, which was the first cob LED that I made that was duct cooled, I said, I wonder if those guys have ever thought about LEDs for their boxes. It would really make them a lot, because now all my heat is behind, and you can evacuate that without disturbing your CO2. I said, I'm going to call those guys, because these LEDs would really make their boxes go over. Because I'd actually looked into your boxes some, and there were a few people that said, I'm making it work, but then there was guys saying I'm having a little bit of heat issues, So I said, well, I'm going to call it. And I don't remember who I got on the phone. It was a secretary at the time, probably. But she's, they said, I will fix you up with Blair. And so I got to talking to Blair, and just said, look, man, have you looked into LEDs? He said, well, as a matter of fact, we are. And Blair can kind of tell the story. They were already into testing with some name brand LEDs at the time, and are still out there today, some of these companies. And I said,
So I shouldn't trash them?
What
year did you first start thinking, like, okay, you brought up a great point. It wasn't about affordability. Now it's all about affordability. It was about, does this thing grow plants? Does it grow cannabis plants?
LED early on was on the radar.
Yeah.
It just was, when is it going to be at a
when is it
point?
going to be there?
It's great for vegetation at that time.
Sure.
But when it came to flowering, it just did not produce.
It just
and
didn't
of
have
course,
the
that's what
ass.
we all wanted and needed.
Yeah.
So we tried, I reached out to company after company. And the beautiful thing about our boxes is that you can do an honest side-by-side test. Same plant, same box,
About
same
as
box.
controlled as it gets.
Absolutely,
variable,
right? And so I would try, and I would try, and I'd try. And unfortunately, it's not a simple, quick answer. It's 3 months before.
Every data point takes 90 days.
And then let's just say maybe you messed up along the way. Did something wrong. Let's give it another shot. You try again. So it's time consuming. So we had gone through 5, 6 different lights. And Steve calls up. And
Steve will call anybody.
Yeah.
And then what does he call them?
and then so I just was honest, and then just like, Steve, this is my problems. This is the issues that I'm having. LEDs, they're straight down. They're getting better, but when it comes to flowering, they're not producing the yields we're looking for. And we got to talking and just starting about development of an LED light product for our boxes. And Steve, he told me all sorts of crazy, outlandish stuff about his products. And I'm like, until I can test it, I can't do anything. So get me a prototype. So we went through and we talked about...
Yeah, so I signed an NDA with you guys,
Yeah.
and you guys sent me the prints for the boxes, right?
and for the panel that size that we needed, because we had our HPS above, all air cooled. Glass that separated the lights from our plants, and the CO2 was injected into the box. Okay. So what the thought was, let's just get rid of the glass and put in aluminum panel with the lights in it right there into that same hole.
It's
so you
basically
could,
a perfect retrofit.
Yeah.
so and you could go back to all your clients from 15 years ago and be like, hey, let's update your HPSs into LED.
Yeah.
And then Steve
So
went
I
to
got
do his magic.
Yeah, so I got the prints for the different size glass, and I just got to measuring around. I said, well, to get a really good spread, this one's going to need 4 cobs spread out like this. This one's going to need 2. This one's going to need 6 or 8. And I even there was a space in between on what was the big
Producer.
one? The producer. So
Yep.
the producer had this big space in the middle, and there were 2
Offset.
pieces of glass. So I offset the panels, so there was a left and a right,
Yep.
and all this stuff. And then I put them dimmer boxes so that you could reach in the box and dim them up and down, and that was really nice. And
Potentiometer.
potentiometer, so you could dim them up and down, and then he told me about these. You were using a den rail, and the first time I went down to, let me think where I bought this from, Kendall Electric. It was, we got an account there now. Well, they charged me full retail, and he's like, you put these pins on there, and you shove them in. Well, I bought these Panduits, and they were ridiculous. I was like, oh my God, they're like $2 a piece. It's $6 just for one wire to go in, and so finally I talked to him and I'm like, can I use tin bonding? You're like, yeah, sure. And I was like, whew, there goes, because
Yeah.
these things were maybe $2 a piece. And the reason was they had a special rating for the national laboratories. So that was the only part they kept in stock. The ORNL would buy them because they were rated to be around radiation. So those first ones that were red were some real wide, expensive part that I should have never been using, but it worked, right? And so I built these different panels, and I sent them to you guys to test. And I remember, I think maybe the first grow, something got messed up, and then it was like a little longer and a little longer. And then finally, he was like, okay, this looks pretty good. I think that we're going to get there. And then I had to teach them how to grow with LEDs.
Right.
So I'm like, he was like, well, we're getting the boxes. The temperatures are great. We're in these 70s. No. You've got to raise your temperature up. And that was the trick. He's like, but what about the temperature of the water? I said, well, you don't have that radiant heat. So the water didn't end up being a temperature problem like you thought it would,
Correct.
even though the boxes were in the 80s. Then all of a sudden, he's like, okay, the yield is really the same. And
what
at
kind
first,
of watt reduction are we looking at?
well, so at first, when I made the producer, if you remember, I made it with two 320 drivers. And it was so much light versus two 400 HPSs. But I was like, well, you're saving 80 watts each. And he was like, oh, my God, it's just like, there's so much light in here, I can't stand it.
No, it was-
So then I dropped him down to two 240, HLG 240s. And then he was like, okay, this is a match.
And I think
800
that's when we brought the potentiometers in, because
Yeah.
we were realizing also it's so much light for doing veg.
Yeah.
It's like we need to turn that down and then
It was a little bit of evolution. And
Yes.
So from 800 watts down to around 500 watts,
Yes.
33%
even
reduction.
Because was it 220? You
It
got
was
them down?
it was like 220 is what I dial them to,
Okay.
because I remember it didn't fill the driver completely up because they were constant, because I was wiring them in series.
Okay.
Because so the cobs wouldn't fill it up. The 320 was that oddball. I think it was maybe a 1750. I think is what I was using.
And I think in the bloom box we had a higher driver. So in the producer we had two smaller drivers.
Yeah, and then you had
because
320
we had
in the
bigger
bloom box,
space.
and we did 4 cobs, but we spread them out a little bigger because it was 2/3 of a producer, I would say, in the bloom box. So we went to the 320, and then you had the mothership. It had 2 cobs, and they were 4K instead of the 35K.
Yes, for
and
the
then
mothership.
I moved them to the Citizen cobs, and then we went Citizen cob 90 CRI. And that 90 CRI 3K, even though it wasn't quite as efficient, had that beefy heat sink. So we were great, right? Because you had those pin heat sinks, and they were being forced air cooled because they were forced air cooled in those hoods. So the fans were blowing on those pin heat sinks. These things were running like 25C. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so we were golden on temps, on thermal junction temperatures and things. And they were that 90 CRI really brought the plants out. They did so well, and yeah, that was it. And then so I made the mothership. It was 2, and it was the only one I couldn't sit it on my counter when I was building them because I was just building these in my basement, just so you know.
Well, I
at the
learned
time.
that today,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
talking to your wife.
Yeah. So I was
Hey,
building
fake it till you make it, bro.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would go and do drywall all day long, come home and build their lights until like midnight every night, and just build them by hand myself. But I knew when I was building them, these things, and the failure rates were really, really low because I did it myself, you know. And I was working my ass off. I'm like, I'm going to get this LED company off the ground somehow.
So you took your relationship beyond the prototype phase, and you actually had a production unit.
Oh, yeah, they
absolutely.
sold hundreds of them.
Yeah, the minute that I was proved to myself that this is, actually producing and
the real
better
deal.
then it was easier for me to sell it to the client. It was still an upsell, right?
Yeah.
But hey, look, you're going to draw less power. There's going to get better yields, better quality. It was very easy for us to sell and then pretty soon it became where people didn't even want to think about HPS.
Right.
Right? And it was just LED. And then we moved. Well,
Yeah.
then
And
you
so-
kept calling me about, we got these quantum boards.
Yeah,
Blair,
Yeah.
you
I
got to
had
move
these
over to
quantum
these
boards,
quantum
and I
boards.
built some prototypes, and they were, so I had these quantum boards, and I built them some samples, and the quantum board was evolving so damn fast at the time. I think it was 304, then it was 288, and then it was like, I think, then we'd had the R spec, and I was like, God, I don't know, man. It just keeps evolving. So they would try one. I'm like, well, we got this new one. Well, shit, I just not got done testing this one. Sorry. And then I had the Diablo boards was the final one. I think it was just starting to come out.
I remember being a little perturbed about that because Amit
Perturbed,
sold
I
me some. Amit's in the background, the other co-founder of HLG. He sold me the 111, 112 volt quantum
304,
boards,
yeah.
the 304 diode boards. And then it wasn't but like 6 weeks later, and a much more driver-friendly 54-volt board comes out. I'm like, bro, like back then, I was like,
I thought I was your friend.
yeah, I was like,
But yeah, well, I mean, we were just, like I said, we were really, all of us were learning. I mean, at the time, if you think about that forum, there was nobody putting LEDs on boards at all, right?
No.
And it was just like, okay, so we wanted the certain length of strings because it was all based around, and we never used them. It was the optics, right? So Liddell makes this linear optic that was called the Florence series. And that's where the quantum board, if you look at it to this day, I've never removed those lines on absolute purpose, because it's like one day,
remember your
one
roots.
day, yeah.
But people were very concerned about a diode exposed to open air.
Yeah.
And even back in the chip on board LED days, people were concerned that was uncovered and that surface felt soft, and you thought you're going to spray it with foliar spray and screw it up.
Right.
So it was a legitimate concern.
Yeah, it was. And so, especially the Cobbs, I understand because your electrical connections are kind of out there. But then Samsung really stepped up after the 561, and they started using what you call anti-sulfurization coating on the leads. So just by default, silicone ends up being a conformal coating now, right? And so the phosphorus is silicone, right? So it's a silicone-based phosphorus coating, so it was kind of waterproof to begin with, except for the leads. Until the leads, and then the leads were anti-sulfurization, which is what happens when you spray it with foliar spray. Yeah. So it helped a whole lot. But the boards themselves are mostly salt resistant. But if you're just like, I don't give a shit, you're going to screw your stuff up. Yeah. But and we're finally finding a solution for conformal coating, but up until now, every company has used different solutions, and they've all come back to bite them in the tail because they end up hurting the LED or doing something else, like prematurely failing.
Yeah, and my old company,
we
we used acrylic optics because we were like catering to our customers' concerns of water damage, and so we had this acrylic optic to completely cover everything. And then anytime you pass light through a thing,
you're losing
transparent, translucent, or otherwise, you're losing light.
That's right.
You're losing plant usable photons, right? And we had this O-ring you had to fit in there. It was almost like you're taking a head off of an engine. You had to fit this perfect O-ring around like the fuel pump or the oil pump or the water pump or whatever. And it was such a pain in the ass, and light loss, et cetera. So, the conformal coating that you mentioned, I think maybe Fluence was probably one of the first people I saw using it. A lot of people have been using it, but even then, it's like if you cover over the diode, cover over the phosphor, if you pour it too heavy, you could maybe discolor it. You're going to have some light loss. So like people always ask about optics in as far as LEDs are concerned, but I mean, it's to protect yourself against this once a week that you're going to foliar spray. Like, I don't know. I want the max light possible. I don't know. That's just me. I mean, I run a grow where we have employees and stuff, and we've been running for 18 months, and never have I had an employee take the backpack atomizer sprayer and just go willy-nilly like a fireman's hose, and we're running all HLG lights, and we got over 100 lights, and we've never had like a single diode failure, and we're fogging rooms out. But
unless you got like a pump system, you got the spray on, and it's just like
blast the light.
Yeah, well, there's that, but then also, the way over the course of the years, and I've always designed the lights to be a little farther from the canopy than these bar style lights, right? Sure. Because everybody's like, I want to be able to grow real close to the plants, but it's like when you look at the inverse square law, it doesn't work. There's a reason HPS really penetrated the canopy better, and it's the spread, right? So, and then also, okay, so now my lights are 6 inches from my plants. Well, that's great, and they're okay that way. How are you going to service your plants? Well, all you got to do is go in and move your light, service your plant. Every day, you're going to move your lights up and down, and you've got 30 lights, you got 100 lights.
It's time consuming.
Put these things out of the way above your head where you can just go in there and work and go on. And then if you're this far away, what are the real chances of you spraying them? I mean, it's pretty minimal unless you're just really being an idiot,
Very
right?
But
short like me.
didn't the production standards make you have to do something like that just because of
Well-
safety?
well,
the
no.
CSA would have made out Canadian standard
so
safety.
so there's I could get into it a little bit, but there's ways to isolate your circuitry now to where what CSA, ETL, UL, everybody will say is there's class 1, class 2, right? And basically to be class 2, which you have to be under 100 watts and under 60 volts. As long as those two things are present, it is electrically safe.
Sure.
So all you have to do is make sure that if there's a possibility that they can get more than 100 watts, there's a safety feature. Think the cheapest safety feature on the planet,
A breaker?
even cheaper than that, a non-resettable breaker,
Oh,
a fuse.
yeah.
Ding,
Okay.
ding, ding.
Right, of course.
So that's it. That was the fix. So we'd actually created an enclosure with FRB, fire retardant barrier, for a while, and they worked great. We passed, but they were costly, and they didn't look the best. So, but finally we figured out how to make a class 2 device, on our own. So a lot
It was
of
soul
this.
destroying to watch the employee. HLG was using these flame retardant shields, which were like very important, But watching the employees that had to apply those things, it was like,
The original was we had to buy high temperature spray glue, spray them, put them on,
Oh my God.
wipe them down
Yeah.
onto these PCBs. Then eventually we found a supplier that could actually die cut, and we tried several. They could die cut this thick stuff with multiple layers, and they came up with an adhesive. So you'd peel it, stick it, and it was done. And it worked a whole lot better, and it became really quick, and they would put it on a roll. So you just peel it off the roll.
Right.
Chapow,
Yeah.
chapow.
Like
And-
weather stripping or
Yeah,
Really,
it worked
yeah,
really
for-
well.
I want to
3M.
I want to go back to this transition from HID to LED. So just briefly for me,
Sure.
I couldn't afford to buy LEDs. That's why I had to build my own, and I ended up doing videos and building a following from that because, well, I couldn't afford it. It's just like working on your car. You buy the parts, you install them yourself or whatever. So my first experience with it, though, was I thought, there's like no shortcuts in growing. If you buy cheap crap, you usually kind of get cheap results. If you cut corners, you lose yield or whatever. So when I built this first LED and I had my first harvest and I start like doing the math, I like quadruple or whatever, 6xing the math to I think I'd like discovered magic is what I'm trying to say. Either that or I woke up one day an average grower, because I was only getting a pound per 1,000 watt HPS.
Okay.
That is the level of
So that-
grower
that- that is-
that I was.
respectable. Like way
1
back
pound
when.
for 1,000.
Way back when
But
it was.
I'm
Well,
talking like
in a no CO2 environment.
I'm talking about 07, 08.
Okay, yeah, that 2 is a benchmark at that point.
Yeah.
Two was like,
Yeah,
these
yeah.
people are full of shit. They're not doing this because I'm getting 1, and this was a near perfect grow for me, right? Under 1,000 watt HPS. So we do 4,000 watts over 2 4x8 tables, so it's all combined, and we get 4 pounds, maybe 4¼ pounds. And that was fine for us. It was financially viable and everything. But my very first run on LED, I pulled the equivalent of like 2 a light. But the light was only 600
which
watts.
LED were you using?
I used a BML, Build My LED, the precursor to the Fluent. So it was a Spider-Man light. It was a red and blue, but it had many other different spectra in there.
What would that be equivalent to an HLG product? Just so because I don't know what you're saying.
Well, it would be like an HLG 350R in terms of wattage.
Oh, wow.
But strip bars. It had like 5 or 6 strips in a 4x4 tent. And I think I remember pulling, it was over a pound. So it was a 300 watt draw from the wall, and I pulled like 600 grams. It was almost like 2 grams a watt. And I thought I had discovered fire for the first time. So I felt like, the point I'm getting to is that switching to LEDs made me a better grower, but I wasn't a better grower. It just was easier.
In a
Well,
way,
because
In a way.
Well,
in 2008.
Yeah, around 2008,
but that
2009.
LED he's talking about, so
Yeah.
the BML, that's the precursor to Fluence, right? That 320 watt light was.
And I may be off. It might have been 2010, 2011,
Remember,
somewhere
it was a
in
kit
that
for him to
general.
build himself, so it wasn't actually.
Yeah, it was
buying.
before-
It was
it was-
similar to that light.
Yeah.
So.
Well,
I guess where
That was a
I'm,
red
where I'm
blue one,
confused
though. It
or
was a
where
red blue
I'm
one.
getting at is that in 2014 and 2015, when we were trying the LEDs out,
Yeah.
it was great for veg, but the flowering sucked.
Right.
So like we weren't getting a pound.
I'm sorry. This was 2013 because the product didn't exist. Forget about the years. The important
Okay,
part is
okay, thank you.
I was an average to shit grower
Right.
under HPS. I try this LED thing. All of a sudden, I discovered fire. My
Cool.
yields doubled.
Amazing.
My knowledge level didn't change. My nutrition changed slightly with more cow mag or whatever. But I felt like I discovered fire. And I'm wondering, what was your experience or your customer's experience going from HPS to these Cobb LEDs that Steve was building? Was it like less customer service? Were they having more success? Was there any tangible benefit that you saw?
Yeah, I think there was absolutely the heat. The heat was the biggest thing for our boxes. That was one issue that we had. You had to AC the room or duct out the hot air that was being produced to get really good results.
Okay.
And so we
Depending
found
on the
with
climate, of course.
depending where you lived and
These
what
boxes
season
went
it was in.
everywhere, right? So.
Absolutely. And so definitely we had better results because of the heat factor being down. And then, you have less problems in your res. And so our clients were getting much better results. I really wish we could have gotten the models out with the new quantum boards.
Oh,
because
yeah,
it's night and day.
It
Right?
is.
It's complete.
So the Cobbs were great at the time, So we had the King Bright 120. So I used so most people were using the 90 degree. I think I was using the 120s to really spread the light in the box.
Big glass bubble.
Yeah.
Frog eye optic.
Yep. And to protect them because it was a really tight box, and they would tell them. And so again, you'd be getting really close, and we protected it because of spraying and stuff. And so we put the lensed optics on there. But yeah, so. Yeah, that's the thing. The quantum board. So we were like 1.7 to 1.9 micromoles per joule is where we were with the Cobb LEDs, and that was good. But then, and then we went to then the quantum board came out, and I think what was the
2.1?
What was the
2.1, 2.3?
2.3 was the first 550. 2.3 was the first 550 with the QB 288 with the 561Cs. And then Samsung introduced the 301B. So so it was a funny story, and we'll get into that maybe in a future episode. But Samsung had reached out to us, but so they reached out and said, "What are you using all these LEDs for?" To make it short, we told them. Well, they hired some American sales reps. They didn't have any at the time, so they called us and said, we've got this new 301B. Are you guys interested in it? Really, nobody's biting on it. It's pretty expensive, but here's the photon efficacy for you. And before that, you had to figure it out by putting it on a graph mathematically. What your photon efficacy was, because it was all lumens. And you change spectrum, lumens change. It's when it comes to photons. Mm-hmm. So we did that, and so we did that, and they said this one. So then we came out. We were the first ones, pretty much. I know we were the first ones in horticulture, but I'm pretty sure we were the first company in the world to use 301B. Nobody used their 3030. No one. It was a flip chip, and we were probably the first order they ever received. And we put these on we redesigned the quantum board, and Samsung built them for us. And so they were pilling because horticulture mattered. So we talked them into binning them a certain way, because they still were binning them by lumens, but they would give us our photon numbers. And I said, well, this is what I want to do, because you've got color bins, and you've got voltage bins, and you've got flux bins. I said, well, this is what I want you to do. I don't give a shit if it's 10 steps. So 10 steps means if it was 10 steps apart, and say you had an LED strip on the wall, you would see a difference in the color by the human eye. But the actual color difference is very negligible. The plants would never know the difference. So by including more and more of the entire production, you could peel off a higher photon efficacy up here and get a lower voltage bin. So that means it was more and more efficient. So we were like, we don't care about the steps. We want the most photons. So and
That was a foreign concept for them because they're so used to lighting up hotels.
yeah, they're so used to uniformity is the key.
Uniformity.
And
Create an ambiance.
yeah. And it was really funny too because when you start doing that, you're opening it up to them to where they don't have to produce so many to cherry pick. They're like, well, I'll do that for you extra cheap. So we got a little bit of a discount because if you went with a 3-step, it was
even more.
It was probably 50% more cost than a 5-step.
Sure.
So that was a way that we could pack them on the boards and not destroy the bank.
But you never ended up getting quantum board officially into your product, or did you?
Well, for testing.
For testing
and
only, okay.
Did we ever sell?
You didn't sell any.
No, I don't think we did sell any, but we did testing, and
we got to the point to where I was supposed to ship them, and then that's when Aurora came in.
That's when Aurora came in, and then you guys started working with Aurora and doing more testing, or maybe they just used. Maybe you didn't. Maybe they just used the lights we already had that you had sent us, and they did their own testing on it. And then we were going to roll out a new product called the Roommate Pro, which would have been with an app on your phone and with your quantum boards. They didn't fill us in on all that, but they were looking at the quantum boards because I remember you called and said, they're looking at this much, and then it just kind of, then I think the whole industry tanked.
It did.
Really.
Yeah, and then all the stock markets tanked, and then Aurora, their stocks went from $16 to $1. Yeah. Over time, and they just started getting rid of people, and then they said they're gonna shut the doors on BC Northern Lights.
Okay. Yeah. So walk us through that process. So, I like I said, I remember seeing you guys in the print. I remember coveting the product. I remember thinking this is so cool because my stupid cabinet in my college, apartment or whatever had light leakage. It smelled like a Cheech and Chong movie in there, and like all the stuff I wanted from yours, like smell free, light free, all that injection. Stuff. I wasn't able to replicate, and I'm a reasonably talented engineer. I became more so, obviously, in my 20s and 30s. But walk me through. So, you obviously had great success throughout the early 2000s. Obviously, you built a wonderful business. You transitioned into some of the chip-on-board LEDs, and then where did it go from there? Because you can no longer purchase the product today. Correct.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, Aurora,
and this is the publicly traded.
So the owner,
Aurora Cannabis.
Aurora Cannabis.
Yeah, Canadian company.
In 2017 or 18, bought BC Northern Lights
from you.
Yes. Well, I was not an owner at the time. Okay. This was Taryn Rhys's business partner
that bought me out.
That bought him
years
out.
earlier.
Okay. And so, and we had developed another product called Urban Cultivator, which it grows microgreens, herbs, and sprouts. Looks like a wine fridge, plugs into your kitchen cabinetry, and it grows microgreens.
Bougie.
And then yeah, exactly, Bougie. And then there's the bigger two-doored versions for like restaurants and stuff. So, beautiful product. We were on Shark Tank.
No,
but
Shark Tank.
no. I'm just.
Yeah,
Shark Tank is one, half dozen the other.
Shark Tank is the American version. We're the Canadian, which is Dragon's Den. We ended up getting a partnership with one of the. Point is, develop that company up. So we had both going. Aurora comes along. They're growing. Their stock is growing. They have so much money. They buy both of our companies. I stay on board, and I work with Aurora, and they want to reinvent the wheel and start and build a new box. And we already had this new box that we were already working on that has the phone app technology, but we reinvented a new one. We spent a lot of money, and we were almost ready to release it. There was just a few more things we need to work out, but their stock started going down. They had to tighten up, and our division of the Aurora company was
not
done.
Important to them anymore.
Okay. Yeah, R&D funds are.
They had to cut corners in order to keep their business going. So they basically said, we're shutting down BC Northern Lights, and this is COVID deep. This is, or beginnings of. This is 2020 in January. And then they say, April 1st, we're shutting the doors down. I'm like, what? Is this April Fool's? Like, what are you doing to us here? Well, okay, you're not shutting this down. I'll buy it. I'll keep this thing going.
Bring it back.
So I, myself, and Justin Lacey, who was,
I remember
you
him.
remember Justin.
Yep.
So Justin would have been the guy that would be working with to build the actual units that we were doing, the cob units, at BC Northern Lights. So we team up and we're like, okay, we'll buy it back. Yeah. And so we buy it back. I call up Taryn. I'm like, Taryn, man, you want to come back? You want to come back into the fold? And he was like, hell yeah. So he came back in. We formed BC Northern Lights again, and we carried it on. We kept it going, and we kept trying to build this new, what's called the Roommate Pro, and putting more money into it and this and that. And we were working with you. We had the quantum board ready to rock. And then our landlord of 16 years decides to say, sorry, we're not going to renew your lease. Okay, this is a hassle, right? It's a hassle, but it's not the end of the world. Let's just get a new location. Sure. So we look, and we look.
During COVID, during like prime time.
This is a year, this is now 2021.
Okay.
Probably a year later, we get the notice that we have got to get out. So we start looking for a new location. 1 month goes by, 2 months go by, there's nothing. We're calling all the company, what do you call those? The realtors we're commercial realtors.
Sure.
Nothing. There's one that shows up. It's 25,000 square feet. We were currently in a 10,000 square foot location. We wanted to go to an 8,000 or something. Sure. Nothing available, and everything way out of our price range.
And what province is this?
This is in British Columbia. This is in Vancouver.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
High dollar as is.
Yeah,
right?
high dollar as is, right? And so it's like unless we were to pick our families up and move to some butthole to go live to keep the business going, would have been really the only way that we could have done it.
Okay.
So it was such a sad thing, after 19 years of a company that we loved, and I had an amazing product. We had to shut the doors. Because
it was hard to see.
My God,
yeah, sure.
the amount of crying that.
Well, that is unfortunate. I mean, like coming from, like I said, for 20 years.
Friends and family that worked and made good living.
I saw your ads and coveted your product in the back of these magazines. But, around the time where LEDs started getting good, around 2016, that was about the time that Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and other similar type of crowdfunded product-based websites got very popular. And it seemed like every couple months, Wired would do a piece on a bougie like a wine cabinet thing, and it had an app,
I think I saw.
And it had peristaltic pumps for your nutrients, and it was basically like all you have to do is show up and put the seed in, and it just does the rest.
Yeah.
And I swear, I mean, I could be wrong. Please, in the comment section, correct me if I'm wrong, but I never saw one of these bamboo case with the stainless steel wine fridge grow boxes actually show up, because I think what happened was in Indiegogo and Kickstarter, they're like, oh yeah, dude, $3,000, you can get this thing with an app and peristaltic pumps. And then they either never got out of Kickstarter and ran away with the money, or this thing was a $10,000 cabinet to grow a quarter pound every 2 months. But you remember that trend, these bougie cabinets?
Yeah. There was a few.
Sure, I thought they'd be cool. I mean, quick side story, like when I went to the University of Texas, and my roommate at the time and I hatched this scheme to grow cannabis for extra cash and personal use. So we ordered Mark Emery, your countryman.
Yeah.
We ordered some Northern Lights number 5 seeds and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and got it going. And we were making some bucks, And fast forward 20 years later, he's the CEO of like a internet tech company. Like he can afford a $10,000 or $20,000 cabinet. He's actually been looking for one and can't find one that actually made it to market. A bougie cannabis cabinet that he can put in his.
There was 3 or 4 companies.
There was one that remember. So the guys that own Kind LED actually had their own. So that was one thing. Super Closet, wasn't it?
Oh, good. Yes.
Well, it
Yeah,
became
Super Closet.
yeah, or somehow they Kind and then
Gorilla Grow Tent too, right?
That's
so
right.
That was Gorilla Grow Tent.
became
Kind.
one big
And
huge
the
entity.
thing was, it's like, so you got this really pretty good damn grow tent in reality when you look at the quality of grow tents, and then not the best LED in the business, combined with with these 2 companies. I'm like, how can these be sister companies? Something so quality, customer support, warranty driven, and then you've got this LED company that's not so much. You know, that one blew my mind, you know, because you get a Gorilla Grow tent, something goes wrong, they'll take care of it.
Right.
Get
there
the other and see if they take care of you.
There was
you
two
know?
or three U.S. companies
Used to.
that came out with those Kickstarter plans and beautiful looking product, but they never really came to market. There was some prototypes that went out, but then they had issue after problem. There was one in Canada that came out and it seemed to do all right for a while, but then it fell off. I actually haven't done my research if it's still going or not, but I think during that same time period that we had to shut her down. I don't know if it's still going or not, but that was the problem. You know, they had this concept of this one plant system. Like, first off, why? Why would you do one plant? Why wouldn't you do at least 4? But also, they had great ideas and great concepts, but didn't have it proven, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that was the biggest thing, and we did with ours.
I think when you get into IoT, Internet of Things, and you get into, you know, your app development, just for your app, not for the hardware, it may be like $250,000 just for the app, and then you've got the hardware engineers, mechanical engineers, and hardware development and stuff. You know, that you might be $1 million into developing a cabinet, and so or maybe $2 million, maybe $3 million, but millions of dollars into developing this cabinet that you're going to sell for. I think people's pain point is like maybe like $6,500, like around there. You know, $10,000 is just too much money for anybody. Like, and $5,000, there's not enough margin.
Although couches are $7,000 now, just to buy a couch, like at least in Canada.
Oh, really?
I just bought a pit couch. It cost me regular $7,900, regular price. I think I bought it on sale for $5,900.
And that's just some wood and some leather.
Like, so.
But
something
I think
that makes you some money.
The failure of these Bougie cabinets was that they were trying to use this like HP printer model where they were going to either lose money or break even on the product, and they were going to somehow make millions of dollars on these prepackaged nutrient things or whatever. There's not, there's a 10x margin on most nutrients, but I mean, bro, it's a cabinet. Like, how many nutrient pouches are you going to go through a year? $120 a customer.
Well, and then the issue is if that company goes under, you've got a box now you can't give nutrients to.
True, because you've got these proprietary unknown blends and stuff. But with that said, I'd love to be the owner of some Bougie cabinet someday.
Sure.
But for now, I think like AC Infinity, if you're familiar with those guys.
A lot of my my home theater
Except for their LEDs.
electronics are cooled by AC
That's where they
Infinity.
came from.
Yeah.
They came from the 19-inch rack cooling space.
I was one of the ones that actually talked to them originally and was supposed to be a distributor before they ever took off in the hydro industry.
They're crushing
You remember
the
that,
game.
Amit? Nobody was using them. And I called, and it was for speaker cabinets. And I'm like, so I actually built a tent. I don't know if you guys remember this or not. I built a tent for this. So I had a tent. It was a 4x6, had a division wall that you could remove. So you could run a 4x6 in flour, and it had a 2 rack. So you had veg, and it would come with a 65, a 100, and then the 550. And so basically I did the same thing you guys did. I made it to where you could run a duct from one side of the tent to the other. One fan would cool the veg area, the bloom area, and it had those blackouts to stop the light leakage. So I did that with AC Infinity. So I actually had a hole cut in it where you could unvelcro it on the front, and that digital display would fit in, and their 6-inch fan would cool the entire tent combo. And I did all that, and then they were going to give me distributor pricing, and then they launched it on Amazon for like $5 cheaper than my pricing. After I almost pulled the trigger, I was like, "You son of a," I would have been so pissed, because I was going to buy like I think a stock of a few hundred fans, and then they would have going to cut me out on Amazon, like directly cut me out. I'm like, what the hell, And that's why I didn't take off with them. But yeah, I built that around. And you know how many people still ask for those tents today? They're so good because it was that perpetual harvest tent idea.
Sure.
You would start out.
Like the bloom box.
Yeah. It really worked well, and it was a 4x6. And
And I think that conforms to a lot of state laws for personal, recreational, personal, medical.
Yeah, how many you can have in veg
around
or-
the extent of what you're allowed to do by law. So you've got like product market fit today. It's a shame that the product is no longer sold. We'll just have to look at it on the Wayback Machine or Google Images or whatever. But I mean, I'm just thinking about my commercial grow, and I could very much use one of your dry cabinets, which is
a good old.
Because here's my issue. I'm on a 2-week cycle, and so when you put a new crop hanging up, you're going to hit 65, 66, 70% humidity. Well, the round that I just bucked 2 weeks ago, it might need to go in the barrels and then come back out, and I need a separate environment where I can get it that last couple percent. You know what I mean? And so a product like that, I mean, I would always be like a customer for something like that. What's the approximate size of?
That's 48 inches wide,
40
by 54 inches tall,
Okay.
by 28 inches in depth.
Oh man, you could probably fit like 15, 20 pounds in there.
You're talking the dryer.
I'm talking about the dryer. Yeah.
Oh, the dryer.
The dryer was a smaller foot.
2 foot by
frame.
2
It's
foot cube.
2 by 2. Okay.
And it all made
2
sense
pounds.
for an 8-foot 4x8 sheet of aluminum.
Oh, of course.
You could work within those confines.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of like a weekend sort of, hey, we need something to dry, and just come up with that idea. Let's put up one of those 4-inch fans in the bottom, a little carbon filter.
Yep.
Instead of pulling through, to push through.
Yeah.
And then dry on these
No,
screens.
it pulled through. It pulled through the side louvers, down through the 3 screens, and into
There's
the carbon
some it's
filter.
used in Victoria. I might actually start cruising around, see if I can find one, because I might just have to have one.
I might cruise eBay for them because they're probably some of your product, because you were selling to guys that are the same age as us. We're all like 40.
I'm
Yeah.
a little older than y'all.
Or whatever, right?
50.
So this is 20. There's some 20-year-old product out there that somebody's wife is like, get rid of this thing so I can park my car in the second
Right.
garage. I'll bet you there might
I
be some
guarantee
deals
there
out
is.
That
there.
I
dryer
guarantee.
was specifically made just to dry enough for what the boxes would.
Okay.
About
produce,
2
which is
pounds.
A couple pounds, right?
Gotcha.
So
Gotcha.
if you're wanting something large.
So speaking about that, do you remember the Phototron?
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday.
no.
I have one
We
still to this day.
So,
Yes.
so I would almost pull a hemp license for this location just so I could set a Phototron right there
Oh,
with a
God.
plant in it for the show.
Steve,
was
wouldn't that be
that the
so
little-
if
cool?
you can't find one, you can have mine.
Okay, would that not be so
was that
cool?
the tall, skinny?
It was
little
tall. It was
tall-
glass all the way around, and
Yep.
it had the teeth. I don't know what they were called, but they had the 2 pins.
Can you
and it would
find
do
that
this,
Phototron,
and-
Chad?
It's
and
tough
was-
to find.
Yeah,
but-
that
Yeah,
thing's-
yeah, you can Google it. Google Phototron. But yeah, I would love to have a Phototron sitting in here with a hemp plant in it. That would be so.
I
so
grew
centerpiece.
like that was kind of one of my first grows was in this Phototron. My first grow. This is actually a funny story. If you want to hear it, my first grow, my buddy calls me up.
It always starts with my buddy, just so you know.
He's like, Blair. I don't know why he called me. Blair, I found some clones. I think these are weed clones. Found them in this dumpster. Don't ask me why he was in the dumpster, but he had some clones, and I'm like, yeah, man, I don't know. Put them in your bathtub for now. And I go on the internet, dial up, do.
Old school.
Old school, whatever.
Dial up.
And I go, how to grow weed. And sure enough, the Anarchist Cookbook comes up.
I had so many opportunities to buy a copy of that. I never did.
So I'm reading through this. I'm like, okay, I'm learning some of the little things. I'm like 18. Okay, 18.6, 12.12. Okay. So I go down to a local store, the lighting store. I'm like, hey, I need some lights to grow some plant. And so they sold me magnetic ballast metal halide, 1,000 watt.
1,000 watt.
1,000 watt metal halide. And then and here's some blue powdered nutrients.
So basically, the same lights are hanging in my garage.
Like
garage.
exactly. So, anyways, I take these. We go and he's renting this house, so we build a hidden room in the basement of his house, and we have a little veg section. We have with some fluorescent lights, and then we have the other plants growing, vegging them up, and anyways,
This is
things are going
94, 5.
yeah, probably 94.
Oh, wow.
93,
Oh, wow,
94,
yeah.
something around there. And so all of a sudden, he then gets a job offer to go up north to go work on the rigs to make like 10 grand a year. So he's like, I'm out. I got to give up this place. So I grab the 2 nicest of the plants and the light, and I take it back to I'm living at home with my parents. Come back to my parents' house. I go underneath the steps, put in these 2 plants, put in the lights, and put some poly up to kind of close it off for the lighting. And my parents come home. I'm like, come downstairs. I got something to show you. And I kind of open it up, and they're like, what the hell? I'm like, it just needs 1 more month to flower. I promise it'll be, I'll take it out. And my mom's all worried about power and electricity. And then my dad looks at me, he's like, I get half.
That was, dude, that's such a different, I wonder if there's a big cultural difference for like, if that's the Canadian parent sentiment.
Oh,
my mom would.
I had no idea my parents smoked weed, or I don't think they really even did. It was just our father. He was a bit of a, I'll play a game here, and I'm just gonna. This is my way of being in control, right?
I love that.
Speak closer.
Right.
There you go.
So,
There you go.
yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it was awesome. But I mean, this grow, man, imagine 1,000 watt finishing these plants in a tight and closed, stair well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a fan, obviously, oscillating fan, and it gets so hot that it's melting the sap out of the wood in the stairs.
Oh,
yeah.
Like so hot. And I'm using this blue powdered formula every feed that I do.
One part. Just
one
some
part,
powder.
just one part powder
Plant
to the whole.
prod or something.
Oh, man.
But I'll tell you, to this day, it's some of the best weed I've ever grown. And it's because I stressed it out so bad.
Yeah.
The trichomes and the crystals. It was really, really hard.
We didn't probably know what
Dense.
the word trichome meant.
No,
back
at the time,
then.
but I just remember it was like falling off. Like in the bag, it was like at the bottom of it was like all this keef in it. Anyways, I gave some to you. You took it to a party.
Yeah.
Older brother. There's some serious growers going on in Kelowna where we are
In that time.
at that time, and
weed
they're
was
like,
$5
"Where
grand
did
a
you
pound
get
back
this?"
Canadians were really pioneers. I think we looked up to Canadian
Kelowna
growers.
especially was kind of the
Yeah, I mean,
The Mecca.
even the idea of a clone was a foreign concept to me. I didn't understand what that meant, And then we had Mark Emery up there in Edmonton, or
No, he's Vancouver.
in Vancouver.
oh, he's in Vancouver. Okay, so it was kind of like it was like there's Amsterdam,
Yeah.
and there's kind of like Vancouver. It's
Right.
like a little Amsterdam, and then there's California where it was cool, and then over in Texas it was like we kind of looked up to those type of people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
yeah,
California, they were definitely ahead of their time for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah,
as well.
so I always looked up to. It wasn't really Canada. It was more Amsterdam and greenhouse seeds and Argent and those guys. That's what I was watching when I first got into it. I don't know if you remember. Greenhouse actually did some greenhouse seeds grows right there on YouTube, and
Well,
you can
actually, they
and
have
you
the
can do it
VHS
week
tapes.
by week, week by week, and so. So my first grow ever was I got a Cannabis Cup winning super lemon haze cut. It was actually the cut off the winning plant, and through a friend, and I remembered I would watch that video over and over because they'd have come back in week number 5 of super lemon haze, most decorated plant. That's what he would say. Do you remember these videos? You have to watch them sometime on
seen them.
YouTube,
Yeah,
but it's
the
so
90s.
good, and I would just watch it. And it would look kind of similar, but my buds were so much better because this guy pheno hunted thousands of plants to get here, and they were just growing one of their seeds, and I didn't realize what I had, but it had made it down, and so my stuff made it around, and people were nuts over it. Now I remember this first time I smoked the weed that I grew myself, and at that time, there was still a lot of Mexican press around, and that was all there was, right? So I was sitting there, and I was like, "What do you think?" And it was 4 of us, and we were about to go do some drywall. I was sitting there, and I'm like, "Oh my God!" And we stopped, and this house we were doing was a multi-million-dollar house, and it probably had a driveway that was half a mile long. We were in the middle of that driveway, and I remember, I won't say his name, but he was kind of sitting there, and like we just kind of come to a rolling stop, and he just sit there, and we all sit there, and we were just baked. And it was
thunder
just-
fuck.
Bumper.
and he was like, I was like, "What do you think?" And he goes, and then finally we're like, "You think we should go to work?" And he's like, and so yeah, and so we were so trashed because we never smoked anything like that, and it was great.
Let's pause. I can't hold it 1
Yeah.
millisecond longer. You take this one. I'm gonna go to the far one. Anyways, before we went on our bathroom break, I always have had healthy respect for Canadian growers. You know, I think it's been like you talked about your story with your parents. My mom would have quoted Nancy Reagan. She would have been like, "Oh, you're going to lose brain." You know, it was just a different vibe. You know, she would her reaction would have been like, "I get half," or whatever. It would have been like, "We have to call the cops. We have to let the police know that we've done this wrong, immoral thing against society, and you just need to pay the consequences." But, you know, with that said, you know, like I have a YouTube channel and stuff. I haven't posted in a long time, but Instagram, and so I interact with a lot of Canadian growers and stuff, and they have a hard time getting HLG lights, to be quite honest. You know, I mean, there's the currency exchange issue. You know, there's export stuff. Luckily, if you follow the stock market, you know, the dollar was like in the stratosphere. Like you could go to Mexico for $6 and stay in a 5-star hotel, right? But you know, I guess the reverse works for Canada because our currencies have always been misaligned. You know, maybe as much as
in 08, I think it was. It wasn't. It was on par. The Canadian dollar was on
buck
par.
for buck.
So when we were primarily being paid in U.S. dollars from 02 to that point, it was like, God damn, this is, you know, $2,000 U.S. is $3,000 Canadian.
Yeah.
And then eventually it became on par. It took a lot of our profitability out.
Okay.
And of course you could adjust your pricing so like a certain amount.
Yeah.
But that was a tough year, 08.
Yeah,
That was
I
a
can
really
imagine.
tough year. We thought we're going to have to close the doors here.
I didn't even know what the stock market was in 08. I was 28, but
Yeah.
I wasn't paying attention. I was like, I wonder why are things getting a little more expensive? Why are people selling that? I was clueless, you know, but obviously today I'm more in tune. But like, so $1 US is about what Canadian today?
75 cents, I think.
Yeah, around there.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
So
it's been 70 to 75 over the last couple of years.
so,
yeah.
yeah. even the
$1.34
US
the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, U.S. is pretty strong dollar even right now. Unfortunately, I mean, and I'm not going to say unfortunately, but it's kind of odd,
Yeah.
considering how much dollars we've created recently. But,
Magically made.
yeah, they just appeared. But
No, there's no
but if you look,
inflation.
but if you transitory. But it's all transitory. But if you look at, you know, I think it was the first time ever, you know, the U.S. dollar in the last 6 months or a year or so was even with the euro. And
Oh,
that was a
Never tried it.
benchmark for me. I was like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
You know, so that's the first time I saw the euro slip like
America
that.
is
You know,
kicking his ass.
But now all of a sudden it's affordable to go to Europe.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I tracked the DXY, which is the dollar versus a basket of global currencies, not any one currency. And I remember during COVID, it was like $1 was worth like $1.08. And now, and that was like during COVID, like with all the printing and stuff. Like a couple months ago, $1 was worth like $1.16. I was like, holy crap, this is like much more. And now it's kind of come back down to reality lately. And like there's an inverse relationship between the value of the dollar and asset prices. So as that dollar like kind of comes down to reality, now you're seeing this burst in the stock market these last few weeks and stuff like that. I don't know how that relates to HLG lights in Canada,
but
and I
it's
don't know how that
interesting.
makes sense. But you know, so after this 20-year journey of like really innovating, creating a product that we've all wanted on our list, like what's next for you guys? Are you going to stay kind of in the industry? Do you see growth in the industry in a recession, global recession potentially, or what's your brain's thinking?
I think it's a bit of a long haul here coming forth, but I definitely see light at the end of the tunnel. You know, within 12 to 18 months, I think things are going to turn around.
Yeah, we've hit the bottom.
Yeah.
You know, as far as the market goes in the cannabis industry, we've hit the bottom.
There's attrition.
Oh yeah,
For sure.
Yes, and it's separating away from the chaff, and those are going to come out the other side looking golden and ready to reset and sort of get into their next viable 10 years. I see that as an exciting time coming up, but
Yeah.
you just have to be patient.
Yeah. I think it's a healthy part of any market cycle. When we were at MJ BizCon here in November, 3 months ago, the sheer amount of extract providers, the LED, and I would suggest everybody go watch LED Grow Lights Depot's video coverage on MJ BizCon 2020, what year was last? 2022. excellent commentary. I'm very insightful. I mean, we had dinner with him a couple months ago, but like he nailed it, man. I mean, there were like 264 LED companies, and that's like
well, there were a lot. But I'll tell you though, as much as I will say there were a lot, I think prior to COVID, the year that we did it, there were a whole lot of LED companies. Yeah. And so I actually walked by a booth, and they were like a distribution company, and they had this, banner with all the brands they represented. And I started looking through there. I was like, holy shit, there's like 8 or 10 of these guys that no longer are in business that are on this thing. So I'm like, what do you do? Just put white tape over them as they drop, So, I mean, there's been a lot kind of go under. So I think this reckoning, so, it was and you Canadians are kind of part of the problem actually, or were, because, what happened was you guys had such a glut that it's coming over the border big time, right? So it's coming over the border, black market there. Oklahoma, there was over 13,000 grow licenses at one point. So cartels were operating huge greenhouses. I mean, it's really bad because they weren't tracking it right. Now they've implemented a plant tracking system, and now they're shutting these pretty much illegal grows that just happen to have a license down. But I mean, I've even heard stories of it coming across the border in Detroit in like trash trucks. Oh, wow. Yeah. So, I mean,
you're talking about the product.
The product. So that's the thing. So there's such a Canada, everybody jumped into it, and then and now, and then too many people are legalizing in America at the same time, and it's just like so much, like you said, it's going to separate out. But Canada really, where everybody and their brother got into it, really created, you guys flooded the U.S. market some even.
Big time.
Remember,
world market.
We're the size of California as far as population.
Right. But if you just think about California, they're the size of California, and they're doing the same thing, though, right? And they've been doing it for years and years and years, So
and they smoke a whole lot of weed.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you're right. I think that it's going to, that the market's going to, it's these guys that aren't really tight ship runners are going to fall off, and the guys that are going to be left standing are going to have, and because thank God it's consumable, right? So at some point, just like if you've got too much corn prices this year may be down, but next year they're finally going to come back when some of these corn producers go out of business because things are too tight. So I think that's where we're at now, is that supply is eventually going to run out, and now the demand and supply will start to
that's
regulate.
what happened because the prices went down so low, because there was so much supply. These growers who didn't have that capital to stay afloat, they had to shut down. Because they couldn't keep the lights on.
For £500, you can't do it.
No, you cannot. You cannot pay the power bills and your staff and everything else that goes on with what you got to do.
Imagine the '90s when it was $4,000 to $5,000 a pound.
I know.
I know.
It wasn't those the good old days.
World now.
You know what I mean? So it's like now, it's like you might pay. I mean, there were times for a really, really good ounce, you'd pay $300 on the block on the street. You know what I'm saying, for a really good ounce, and now it's like, shit. It's not much more for a whole pound,
But most people were breaking law. Most people were criminals. I was a criminal, Now I wear a golf shirt.
You probably still did.
You did back then. Don't jerk us around.
Do you think there's still a healthy home grow hobbyist scene in Canada?
Yeah, I definitely do. Definitely.
Across all provinces?
As long as the dispensaries have crap product, there'll be a homegrown market.
Or there's a guy like me,
or just average, just beasters, just
I don't
mid-grade.
smoke weed anymore. I haven't smoked weed for years.
What about vapes?
No, but I still grow 4 plants every now and then just for fun. I love it.
Love
it's
it.
something
Beautiful.
about it.
I love growing it.
Beautiful plant.
And no, I don't want to grow
the hair on my
tomatoes.
arms standing up just thinking about it.
I agree.
And for me, it's just not something that's jive with anxiety, different things, and maybe I haven't found the perfect strain
CBD
that
or
settles
indica,
me
sativa.
in.
Weed's more fun when you're young.
Yeah,
No
it
wife, no
was.
kids, no bills, no mortgage, no responsibility.
for
You just get fucking freaking blazed and just go out on a boat for 3 days.
Play video
Eat a Costco bag size of chips.
It's just more fun.
Not worry about.
Obviously, there's legitimate medical uses and things. I mean, I got this neck issue right now. That I just can't wait to get home to my vape. But now I vape like it's in my bedside table, you know, because I don't want to like stink up my place or whatever. I'm just old, but I agree with you 100%. You know, whether you're a consumer or not, something about growing this specific genus and
plant,
species
It's
of
amazing.
plant, it's like it fulfills your scientific mind, your spiritual mind, your artistic mind. It doesn't matter what kind of
It's
person you
gardening
are.
of a
It's
different
just-
sort, if
Yeah.
you will, right?
Absolutely,
It is.
absolutely.
I say it all the time. I miss that. I miss it. Just miss it.
And you're so proud. They're your babies.
Yeah.
They're your kids. They're like, oh, look at you. Look at what you
Every little thing
grown."
you do, you know.
And
it's-
pride
nice.
pride is a huge part of it because there's so many more metrics, right? If you grew a big tomato, it would need to be big and it would need to be sweet. Like maybe there's 3 metrics. They're like, oh, it's huge, it tastes amazing,
Yeah.
and there's like minimal seeds. It's great sliced for burgers or whatever. Like, okay, cool, whatever.
But the 4th
with-
metric is I'm combating inflation.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm growing
exactly.
it on my own.
I spent $1,200 to grow $3 worth of tomatoes, right? But with cannabis,
yeah.
there's I don't know. I mean, let's just say there's like 30 metrics that you can fulfill. You know, like I kept this one compact. Internode strength was awesome. Leaves were perfect. Bud structure was great. Terpenes were great. Trichomes were great. Alternative cannabinoids.
I
were great.
cured it correctly.
I cured it correct. I dried it correctly.
That's the number one thing. I've seen so many guys
Yeah.
do such a good job with their grow and then just ruin it with the cure.
the curing.
And it's like,
Yeah,
oh no, you know, jar it too early or any of a number of things. It's like no. You know, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I've got an unorthodox way of curing that, you know, people kind of shake their head at, but I've done it for 20-something years.
Is it the
And-
microwave?
It's a toaster oven. Toaster oven.
The toaster oven. Yeah, no, I'm not about to explain it now, but I'm just saying that, you know, there are certain ways to do it properly.
There's
Yeah,
more
you know,
ways
one
to get
thing, one thing
cavities.
I like, and I'll say it, it's paper bags.
You know,
Oh, the sweating.
I've heard formaldehyde. I've heard this, that, and then I'm like, look, I've been eating lunch. My mom used to put my lunch in those bags. You know, the bags, they breathe a little bit. They block the airflow. You know, in a pinch, I don't see why not.
They work great.
Yeah,
Just a
small
paper
amounts,
sack.
of course.
Yeah,
I just do
sometimes
dry
a paper
sweat,
sack.
dry sweat. You know, and you're done in a week.
Yeah.
And it turns
old school.
It's It's, you know, because everybody's talking about, you know, doing the jars, right?
Yeah.
And the burping. And
Yeah.
and the hang dry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Week.
Yeah.
Type style.
I've had enough of the hang dry. I was growing garlic there for a few seasons, and I've hung enough garlic, enough hang dried. I'm done.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I did two. I did side by side compare. I did hang dry, and I did my method, and I don't know. I didn't see much difference. You know. Anyways,
But
I think for me, it's like, how quickly do I need the money? You know, if I needed the money quickly, I would harvest a wet plant. I would trim it on the stem. You know, like I would dry it like kind of on individual stems for a while. Then I'd buck it off as soon as it was dry enough to where you know how wet bud, when you lay it on a flat window screen, it gets a flat spot. After like 4 days, you could buck it off and it won't get that flat spot or whatever. And then it would already be like pre-trimmed. Those wet leaves would kind of suck into the bud, so you couldn't see the leaves that were trimmed. And then I could sell it on like day 8. You know, but that was obviously a long time ago. You know,
Yes.
it's a little
Yeah.
different now. So
Years are passing by.
But so I think we're getting a little late
Long
into
in
this,
the
but
tooth,
yeah.
yeah.
So I guess the big question in the room is what's your guys' plans moving forward, and I think we know the answer, and so I'll talk about it at least. Blair and I have had a great relationship. I hadn't had a chance to work with Rhys when back in the day, and due to COVID craziness and some other things, we lost our Canadian distributor through some disagreements, and now we're looking at new guys, and these guys have, I'd called Amit, maybe it's been about a year ago now, I guess, and I said, hey, I've got the guys because I know they have integrity, I know they know our product, I know they know their way around to grow, and the most important part is they take care of their customers. And I've always heard that, and I've dealt with these guys, of course, as we know, for years, and that was where this, this why you're here today is this is kind of where we want to go. Is I want to work with people that I'm proud to say that are my friends and business partners, and we've worked together, and I trust, and so that's why these guys are going to be bringing in the product into Canada, and doing our Canadian distribution moving forward.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and if there was a product to bring
here,
to market,
being here in Knoxville, meeting everybody, understanding, I mean, each and every person I've met here in this last over 24 hours, it's like, come on, you guys are all too real.
solid,
Solid.
Know your game, know the industry, and I've known that with Steven. Just talk. When he called and I started talking to him about the LEDs, and I was like, I was a bit apprehensive, and I was like, I don't know, man. Like we've done a lot of LEDs, and then I heard him speak, and he knew his game, and he knew, and then he developed it and built it, and I know that HLG is the best LED product on the market for growing cannabis, and so confident that we'll be more than happy to represent the product for Canada, bring it across all the provinces, and well, just keep on making this LG name.
HLG.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, it goes back to me. Like I said, Blair was always, at first, like he said, he was very apprehensive when he talked to me, and I'm like, no, just trust me. And he's like, yeah, I've heard this 1,000 times.
Proof is in the pudding.
Yeah, but I told him, I said, so I stuck my neck out and I said, well, I'll build these lights for you. I'll develop them. No guarantee I'll ever get a sale, and I'll send them to you and all these parts free. And then that's how confident I am. Here, I'll develop something, so the other lights you tested, maybe you retrofitted an off-the-shelf product, and maybe they gave you an off-the-shelf product, I'm not sure, but you retrofitted it in. I went through the engineering and the design just for this project that if it didn't make it, it was just a total loss, and through that, like I said, when I developed this, the original didn't change my way of thinking, but when we started looking at putting the quantum boards into the grow boxes, we were selling them on heat sinks as DIY kits. We didn't even have a fixture. We were just selling kits. And I said, I bolted them on, bolted the heat sink and sandwiched it. And I'm like, oh, this thermal, on this, these two surfaces trying to come together with 8 screws really probably isn't working the best. So I said, well, let's see what happens without the heat sink. FLIR, looking at the camp. Wow. Maybe you don't need fins after all.
That's right.
Maybe it is 100% surface area. Yeah. And that's where HLG's lights really, through this innovation for these guys, that's where the HLG lights and how they work today took off. And it's like, Ahmet, we don't need finned heat sinks because, you're looking at how do you build this frame? How do you get all the wires looking nice and all this stuff with these finned heat sinks? It's like, we don't need that. And Ahmet's like, it just can't work. And then I was like, no, think about it. It's surface area. You got these fins, but then when they're close together, so you got microclimates, so that air doesn't, you're restricted on your air movement. What's stopping the warm air from rising on a flat surface? Not a dang thing. Mm-hmm. There's no resistance. And sure enough, it was all surface area. So you could literally say, this many watts, this many square inches, and it'll run this cool. And it worked. Yep. And that's where we're at now. So, and,
say it kind of revolutionized the LED
industry. I think a little. I will say, and I told Ahmet, I said, win, lose, or draw, end of the day, I will say that I think we left our mark on horticulture.
I think we did.
I think we've pushed the boundaries and again, back when we started, nobody was doing independent lab tests and saying this is how many micromoles per joule. They were just saying our light's the best.
Yeah.
Believe me. Yeah.
And that was it. They said, just believe me. And that's why I was always like, no, man, not until I test it.
It's like a decade of just believe me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's one of, there were many minor things that people are now conforming to, but all you have to do is go to any show, any horticulture show, and just look at the date stamp on when you guys design your product and look at the way products look today. You know what I mean? But guys, this has been such a pleasure. I mean, it's they say like never meet your heroes or whatever, but like it feels like such a privileged position because, you know, when I was like 23, 24 years old, looking at your product in the back of a magazine, like I said, couldn't afford it. I had student loans and stuff. And then to like meet you and talk to you and hear about the journey and how it all started, it's just, it feels like such a privileged position because we get to meet a lot of people like y'all, you know, that have really, and in your own way, you really did shape the industry. I mean, I can't even, there's no way to calculate how many people like Steve and I, who both talked about buying a metal Home Depot cabinet with an angle grinder and trying to emulate your product, but we're emulating you know, and that was your novel design. So it's just been incredible.
I wanted one so bad. I mean, I wanted so bad. So I showed Brenda. I was like, look, and she even was like, yeah, that's kind of cool.
We were kind of Cadillac.
Like,
I mean, but we
It was
emulated,
Cadillac,
you know, what was out there. We just took it to the next level and made it. You know, just
she was probably like, "Are you going to come get in bed with me?" No, I think I'm going to sleep on the producer tonight.
what's he going to produce?
Good night. Good night, ladies.
Well, it's been such a pleasure, guys. It's such it's so amazing to kind of have you in the greater HLG family as well, because I talk to a ton of Canadian growers, and there's just always frustration getting any American product, you know, up across some imaginary line. So the fact that you'll be able to help us with that and get more, like you said, quality lights. I mean, not quality lights, the best light in the world. And everybody says their light's the best light in the world, but like
the proof's in the pudding, though.
It really is.
And this is it. I mean, the product speaks for itself, right?
And in a declining market, in a global recessionary period, you know, it's all about the ROI of anything you buy, because these aren't joy products, these aren't cars, these aren't rims, these are tools that you're buying, and if the tool doesn't make you more money, then it's not the best tool. And
they're investments.
They're investments too.
Absolutely.
But these are, you know, revenue generating tools, and they generate the most revenue. So I wish you guys the best of luck up there. Obviously, I'm at your disposal. I'm sure this will be the first of many conversations. And
it's too bad there's not direct flights into Knoxville.
Yeah, there's very few. Knoxville goes to Atlanta.
Yeah, but even a direct flight to Atlanta.
Right on, guys. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate having you on.
Thank you guys for coming out.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome.
It's been great.
Awesome.
We hope to have you back soon.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for staying tuned for the entire episode. Since you've been with us for this whole episode, I would like to let you know that we have an extremely exciting episode 4. It's going to be recorded on Valentine's Day, edited as fast as Chad's schedule, our producer, allows. But for the first time ever in any public appearance, we're going to have several representatives from Samsung themselves. These are the people that co-designed the diodes with Steve and Amit, who helped shape the face of the Samsung diode lineup. And we're going to have their engineers, product managers on with us next week. It's going to be an exciting interview. We hope you'll join us, and we'll see you then.